A tiny puppy sits alone on a deserted road, guarding an old suitcase like his life depends on it. Cars pass, people try helping. But he refuses to move, whining, shaking, waiting for someone who never comes. What's inside that suitcase? And the reason he protects it will break your heart. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The sun had barely climbed over the horizon when a delivery driver named Tom spotted something unusual on the quiet rural road. At first, he thought it was just an old piece of luggage someone had dumped by accident. But as he slowed his truck, he realized a tiny puppy, pale-furred, droopy-eyed, barely a few months old, was sitting right beside the battered suitcase. The little dog didn't play, didn't move, didn't even look up. He simply sat there, pressed against the rough surface of the case as if glued to it. Tom stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel. The puppy lifted his head but didn't budge. His expression wasn't aggressive. It was heartbreaking, lonely, confused, determined. The suitcase looked scuffed, sun-bleached and heavy, the metal latches rusted around the edges as if it had been carried for miles. "Hey, buddy. Are you lost?" Tom whispered, crouching carefully. He placed a small sandwich wrapper on the ground, hoping the puppy would come closer. But the little dog only lowered his head and inched even closer to the suitcase, guarding it with quiet desperation. Something wasn't right. Tom knew he couldn't just drive away. Within 20 minutes, a small animal rescue team arrived, their van rumbling to a stop beside the dusty road. As the volunteers stepped out, the puppy stiffened immediately. His tiny paws dug into the dirt, his body leaning protectively against the old suitcase as if bracing for a storm only he understood. One of the rescuers, a gentle woman named Mia, approached slowly with a soft voice. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're here to help." She extended her hand, offering a treat. But instead of wagging his tail like any normal pup would, he lowered his head and let out a quiet, warning whine. Not loud, not threatening, just desperate. Every time someone moved closer to the suitcase, the puppy shuffled with them, blocking their path with his small body. Even when Tom tried placing water a few feet away, the puppy refused to leave his post. He kept glancing between the rescuers and the suitcase, as if expecting someone to come back for it, someone he didn't want them to disturb. Confused and concerned, the rescuers exchanged glances. This wasn't typical stray behavior. Something was different about this pup. Finally, Mia sighed. "We'll take them both," she said. "The puppy and the suitcase." Back at the shelter, the team carried the battered suitcase inside first, hoping the puppy would finally relax once he was in a safe, warm place. But the moment they set it down, the little dog scrambled toward it, pressing his tiny body against the side as if afraid it might disappear. He wasn't interested in the toys scattered around the room or the bowl of fresh food waiting for him. His eyes stayed locked on that suitcase, wide, anxious, unblinking. Mia knelt beside him, gently stroking his head. "You're safe now," she whispered. But even then, the puppy kept leaning into the suitcase, as though it held the only comfort he'd ever known. When another volunteer tried lifting the case to place it in a corner, the puppy whimpered loudly and pawed at their leg, frantic. They set it down again, and immediately he curled up beside it, resting his chin against the rough leather surface. The staff exchanged worried looks. Puppies usually adjusted, quickly playing, exploring, forgetting. But this little one wasn't forgetting anything, whatever was inside that suitcase. It meant everything to him, and the shelter workers realized they couldn't ignore that any longer. Over the next day, the shelter staff began piecing together small, unsettling clues about the puppy's past. During his examination, the vet noticed the subtle signs first. His ribs were just slightly visible beneath his soft fur, and the pads of his paws were worn down, the kind of wear that only came from walking a very long distance. He wasn't a street pup born outdoors. He had come from somewhere. Or worse, he had been trying to return to someone. The vet scanned him for a microchip, hoping for an owner's name. But the screen stayed blank. Back in the main room, volunteers kept catching the puppy pawing at the suitcase, scratching gently at its edges as if trying to open it himself. When they moved it to clean the floor, he followed closely, whining, circling it, nudging it with his nose until they placed it down again. A young volunteer named Ethan studied the scene quietly. "I don't think he's treating it like an object," he finally said. "It's like something inside it matters to him." The room fell silent. For the first time, the team began wondering if the suitcase wasn't abandoned at all, but intentionally left behind, and maybe the puppy wasn't waiting for rescue. Maybe he was waiting for someone he already lost. By the third day, the tension inside the shelter was impossible to ignore. Every time a staff member walked past the suitcase, the puppy's head snapped up. Every time someone bent down to clean near it, he rushed over protectively, tail tucked, eyes wide with fear. It was clear now of her truth the suitcase held. It was the key to understanding him. Finally, during the evening shift, Mia gathered the team. "We can't help him unless we know what he's holding on to," she said softly. "It's time to open it." They moved slowly, choosing a quiet corner of the shelter. The puppy immediately followed, whining as if he sensed something important was about to happen. His tiny paws danced anxiously on the floor, and he pressed his nose against the case. Almost pleading with them to be gentle, the suitcase's rusty lock resisted at first, creaking from age and weather, until Ethan carefully pried it open with a small tool. The sound echoed through the room, a brittle snap that made everyone freeze. Mia rested her hand on the latch. "Whatever's inside," she whispered. It mattered to someone. Then, with a deep breath, she lifted the lid, and the room leaned in, bracing for the truth waiting inside. As the lid creaked open, the puppy whimpered, a soft, trembling sound that made everyone's chest tighten. Inside, the suitcase wasn't filled with clothes or trash or anything anyone expected. Instead, it held a small collection of items that told a story without a single spoken word. Right on top was a faded blanket, worn thin and frayed along the edges. The moment Mia lifted it, the puppy's nose shot forward, sniffing urgently, tail trembling. It was his blanket, the one he'd slept on, the one that smelled like home. Beneath it was a half-empty bag of puppy food and a tiny rubber toy with bite marks on every corner. Then a collar blew, cracked, and broken, likely torn off in panic or fear, but the final item stopped everyone cold. A folded letter. Mia opened it slowly, her eyes scanning each handwritten line. With every sentence, her breath grew shakier. The owner had been homeless, living out of that very suitcase, trying desperately to keep the puppy fed and safe. But life had grown unbearable. Shelter rules wouldn't allow pets. Food had run out. Hope had run out. And with a breaking heart, the owner wrote, "Please, whoever finds him, love him. He's the only family I ever had." Silence fell. Everyone looked at the puppy and understood exactly what he had been waiting for. Mia pressed the letter to her chest, eyes glistening. The room felt heavier now, not from sadness alone, but from understanding. The puppy wasn't guarding a suitcase. He was guarding the last pieces of someone who had loved him with everything they had left. Gently, Mia knelt beside him. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. The puppy hesitated, glancing back at the open suitcase as if asking permission to move forward. Then, slowly, he stepped into her arms and rested his head against her shoulder. His tiny body finally relaxed for the first time in days. The team decided together he would never be abandoned again. Mia filled out the adoption papers that very night, promising him a home, a family, and the life his owner had desperately wished for. The suitcase stayed with him, not as baggage, but as a reminder of loyalty stronger than heartbreak.